Alright guys, I wanted to try to break some of this stuff up into more informational videos. So unfortunately, although we are driving the Dakota, I'm still waiting on the turbo actuator. The first one I got doesn't seem to be working, so I ordered another one to try that. We're about a week out of getting one of those. But I have just a lot of little details I wanted to go over. And so we're going to go for a little drive, but it's not going to be anything too exciting, so you'll have to keep waiting on that. But what I wanted to go over was, I've talked about this with my Jeep video, but it seems to be pretty common with the Chrysler setups. So I have the crank sensor is in the bell housing running off of the flywheel, which is still the Jeep flywheel for the AW4. Unfortunately, I'm getting some bad fluctuations in the tach now that I have it working. I'm not sure if that's the Chrysler variance between the 4-liter and the V8, but it is working, so I wanted to go over what I did to make that work. So again, you just plug the crank sensor into your wiring. If you're doing a Jeep or even one of these Dakotas and you're leaving the factory one in there, nothing will change that way. What you want to get into is your cam sensor. That is a 3-wire sensor, and you're going to want to find the sense wire. On this thing, it was like a tan. There's an orange power. I think the ground is like blue. There's some stripes in there, but anyway, find your sense wire. And so what I did is I ran that up to here, and I'm using this relay to mimic a cam signal. So what it's looking for is a ground pulse. And so to recreate a ground pulse, I'm using the power from the starter. Don't mind my jumpering into the starter here. I've already had to bypass the ground to make the starter work anyway. But I'm using that for the ground here. And let's see if we can look at this guy. This is just a regular, it's a 53 relay out of the Volkswagen, but it's an 87 relay, pretty common. So the 85 is negative and the 86 is positive to trigger a pulse, or to trigger the relay on. And so what we're wanting to do is trigger the sense wire with a negative signal. So we're sending the negative to the 87, and whenever this gets power, it's going to feed negative to the sense wire on the cam signal. And if you use your power as the actual start, so this is the wire physically going to the starter, this red one, I tied into that. So when you turn the key to start, you're going to send 12 volts to here and trigger the relay on. And when you let off, it's going to drop the pulse. So it's going to give a pulse on off, one pulse, as you start it. And that worked perfectly to kick the tach on my Jeep. And I did it again here. And as you can see, we have somewhat of a jumpy tach, but we definitely have a tach working. So that is what I wanted to go over for your Chrysler tach signal. Alright, and now I wanted to go over my rail shifter for the AW4. I've got it kind of mounted here right next to the shifter, so it works pretty well. But so basically, most of these 4-speed automatics have 3 solenoids, one to shift from first to second, one to shift from third to fourth, and then a torque converter lockup. Now, at least on the AW4, you can actually leave the torque converter locked. I have a little switch right here to leave it on, and as long as you're in first or reverse, it will not lock the torque converter. So as long as you go to first as you're slowing down, you won't stall it out. But if you have it in second, third, or fourth and you come to a stop with the torque converter locked, it will die. So as it works with this thing, basically reverse is normal, neutral, and then once you go to drive, this thing sets up pretty nice here to where I can rest my hand and run the shifter. So we'll go ahead and get up to speed here. And shift to second. And again, the torque converter is locked now. You can feel it'll rev up when I turn it off or lock back in again. And then we can speed up, get to third. And then if we go again, I'm not going to go too much faster here, but there it drops to fourth. Back to third. A little hard to drive here with this thing, but anyway, it kind of gives you control. You can leave it in third here, cruising at about 50. But if you needed to pass somebody or something, you can just run it up to second and be right there ready to take off. So I'm pretty pleased with that. It works pretty well. Well, that's what it looks like. So, and then as you're slowing down here, you just got to downshift and get back to first, and then torque converter is still locked, and it unlocks, I should say, in first. Yeah, I'll have to get you guys a better video when I'm not on my dirt road trying to hold the camera and shift, but you can see it works pretty slick to do that. And my Tach is definitely off and bouncing around, so I'll have to see. Hopefully a new sensor, crank sensor, will smooth that out. But when I'm not trying to hold the steering wheel and video, it is pretty fun to run through the gears with this shifter, and it works pretty slick. But yep, all the gauges are working. So I am overall pretty pleased with everything inside. So that's probably it for this video. Again, just waiting on that turbo actuator, and I should be able to get a test drive here. We're going to work on some gauges. I did actually find a way to mount. Let's see if I can set this up for you guys. I'm going to go ahead and mount the gauges down here. I just notched this gauge pod to fit around the power outlet, and it should work pretty slick. So get those mounted up so I can have some gauges while I test drive instead of just some temporary stuff. So yeah, stay tuned.